Facebook.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Shall we get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, are you feeling nervous?
A little bit.
A little bit? Yeah. This is my first time on Facebook Live.
Same.
Is it? Okay.
Never done one before.
Okay. Now, I know the topic we're going to talk about is prophetic communication. And I know you want to introduce it more formally, but I had a thought about let's make it practical from the moment go.
Yeah,
If you feel
sounds
a little
good.
nervous, I'm feeling a little nervous. Let's do a little breathing exercise
Yeah,
before we get to it. Yes?
let's do
Are
it.
you? Okay. Now, this is called box breathing. The reason it's called box breathing is because you're going to do a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4 counts of 4, and
Mhm,
that makes, okay?
mhm.
So what we're going to do is that we're going to breathe in for a count of 4, and then we're going to hold for a count of 4. Then we're going to breathe out on a count of 4, and we're going to hold on a count of 4. So
Okay.
that's really going to force us to breathe really slowly
Mhm.
and fill our lungs. So we get more oxygen, and you'll also calm down at the same time.
Okay.
Yes? Shall we
Mhm.
do it together? Okay.
Yes.
I can't say it and do it at the same time, so I'm going to count it out. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Are you getting the hang of it?
Yeah, I
I'm
think
not
so.
doing numbering wrong. Let's do it one more time, okay?
Yep.
Breathe in at 1. How does that feel?
Good.
A little better?
A little better, yes.
Okay. And because it's prophetic communication, let's begin with the dua of Prophet Moses on MVPs.
Mhm.
Okay. رب اشرح لي صدري
Rabbi.
ويسر لي
Oh, sorry, I'm saying it to myself.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري
Wait.
واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Yeah. My Lord, relax my chest and ease my task, remove the impediment from my speech so that they may understand what I say.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to BIS's Real Talk with students and faculty. My name is Nuha Muntasser. I've been a student with BIS for a year and a half now. BIS has been a consistent source of nourishment for me, especially at a time like this. I'm so happy to be a part of this series. It allows for a space for Islamic intellectual dialogue on today's most relevant topics. The series explores principles that Boston Islamic Seminary seeks to uphold as an Islamic academic institution in the United States. This is also a great way to get to know some of BIS's esteemed faculty and the unique experiences and knowledge that they share with their students, such as myself. So I am very excited to introduce Ustadh Abdur-Rahman Syed. I actually took his class back in January, which seems like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah.
Ustadh Abdur-Rahman Syed is an international business advisor and communications expert with a special interest in the Islamic economy and in prophetic approaches to the human sciences. Ustadh Abdur-Rahman is the founder and executive director of Algebra, a UAE-based advisory firm that helps business and nonprofit leaders identify and communicate their vision and strategy. He has more than 15 years of experience in branding, communication strategy, marketing, and corporate strategy in financial services, hospitality, education, philanthropy. He has also advised clients in the UK, US, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Malaysia, in addition to serving in strategy and marketing positions in the international Islamic finance and investment industries. He is also a visiting faculty member at the Karachi School of Business and Leadership. where he teaches MBA students and facilitates corporate workshops on management communication. He is also working on a book on prophetic communication, which I'm very excited to read one day, inshallah. Ustadh Abdur-Rahman holds a bachelor's degree in politics and religion from Harvard University, with postgraduate study in political philosophy at the University of Chicago and Boston University. He was an active member of the Boston and Cambridge Muslim communities from 1995 to 2000 and 2000 to 2011 before moving to UAE. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I realize now when you said that you would share the profile from the website. This is the long version.
Well,
you should have trimmed it down a little bit. I'm happy to be here.
You've accomplished so much, so I'm very excited to speak to you, and I know our viewers are excited to listen to what you have to say in regards to this topic, very important topic. So our conversation today is about the essence of prophetic communication, right? An important topic to me, an important topic to many people, including non-Muslims. In fact, many people gravitate towards books like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, you know? But the truth of the matter is, while these resources and the fields of communication and psychology are very important to look into, we often forget and neglect that Islam provides us with not just one, but two guides as to how to perfect communication in all areas of our life, and why it is crucial, actually. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to be good to our parents and respect them at all times. You know, he tells us to never say uff and to always use noble language towards them. The Quran also says that those who have good speech are the ones who will invite others to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this shows us that language and communication should be beautiful and inviting, and it is a crucial aspect to Islam and being a Muslim. Now we also have the Sunnah, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed us how to communicate with people in different settings through his actions and in language. He showed us why it is important to know how to do so as well. And so my first question to you is, why is it important to strive to perfect our communication skills the way the prophets showed us how?
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Well done. It's almost like you don't need me here. Great. Thanks for getting it started. Okay, so why do we need prophetic communication? That's a great question. I guess you could approach it from different angles. I mean, I think if you take a historical, even unbiased view, it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or not, it doesn't matter whether you're religious or not. It's a historical fact that when we look at the sweep of human history, the greatest influence of history are God's messengers. They may not have been the most popular men of their particular communities, depending on the prophet, but they had a very particular message, the message of monotheism, and they literally went door to door. You know, we have a particular image of door-to-door salesmen, and we think sales is a different thing, and the message is a different thing when it comes to matters of truth. But the most effective communicators in history, professional salesmen, were the messengers of God. So if you want to tune up, if you want to improve, strengthen your communication, why would you not want to look at the best? And when it comes to people who believe in God, there is the added benefit. Not only were these, the most influential messengers in history, because they changed the course of history, but they also did so in a way that we can respect. They took the high road to communication. So for those of us who want to be better communicators, great. There are no better communicators. And yet, those of us who want to be better communicators, but not at the expense of ethics, they set beautiful examples for us. And the reason I'm drawn to prophetic communication is because I'm able to say with sincerity to my students that if you follow the principles of prophetic communication, you will not only be a better communicator, you will be a better human being.
I mean, that makes me think of, the fact that what specifically, makes prophetic communication what sets it apart from others?
Yeah. Yeah. So certainly prophetic communication is communication. It's not something that's set apart. We're not talking about speaking in tongues. We're not talking about employing an exalted language. We're not talking about quoting Quran or quoting Hadith. We're not talking about da'wah, right? So there's certain conceptions that may come to mind that we should dispel. We're talking about communication. We're talking about human communication. But the question is, how can we carry out human communication in a way that's both effective and emotionally intelligent? And the way that the prophets tell us, really, in my own research, and I'm not a scholar of the Quran, I'm not a scholar of Hadith, of the Sirah. I'm a professional in the fields of strategy, branding, and marketing. And I find that professionals, Muslim or otherwise, we really don't get a lot of guidance on what frameworks are appropriate. And the guidance that we get are really hand-waving gestures towards ethics. They don't really incorporate a principled perspective on how to communicate effectively, but also ethically. And the prophets tell us that. I mean, I could give you so many examples. Let me distill it into the rules that I generally share. I call these the 6 rules of prophetic communication. The first is to listen before you speak. The second is to give before you take. The third is to connect with me. The fourth is to listen. Now I'm forgetting my own rules. Listen before you speak, give before you take, connect with me. Imagine a better world. That's so important, right? To be able to share a vision of what the world might look like. That's imagine. And then invite me. Now, invite is really the 5th one. And if you look at the Arabic, that's the da'wah, that's the call. But it's interesting that it comes after you have the opportunity to build a relationship. Invite me to join you in that world. And then above all, love me and wish me well. So these are in English, you could say almost in secular language, but deeply rooted in the practice and then the message of the messengers of God, to listen, to give, to connect, to imagine, to invite, to love. And there's, the stories in the Quran and outside the Quran are replete with these principles, and we could go into any of them and spend an hour just on one of those principles.
So these principles and these components, and you had also mentioned emotional intelligence.
Yes.
What specifically interests me, which I think, connects to this idea of emotional intelligence, is that, the Prophet, peace be upon him's communication, he communicated with empathy. And, we saw how that played a role in his conversations with people. Empathy was so perfectly conveyed in his conversations that it left no room for doubt in a person's heart that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam's, or I should say, not only did he care for this person, this person felt that he or she is important to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And so, especially at a time like this, the etiquette of conveying empathy and care, I think, I'm sure you do too, is very important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So my question is, why is it so important to strive to perfect the etiquette of conveying and displaying empathy when you are speaking to someone?
Well, certainly we could go into very concrete ways in which you can demonstrate empathy, but the underlying principle is the same. When you, and okay, let me put it this way. We don't suffer from a lack of information, right? So especially in the digital age, in a globalized world where information is, everywhere and free, it's not a lack of information that we suffer from. So if you think communication is about the dissemination of information, you're missing something, all right? Because what happens is not only do people get informed, they also get overwhelmed, right? So imagine, just this is sort of a traditional or dated example of a radio frequency. The difference between the noise and the signal is whether or not you're establishing a frequency, all right? And in in a world where we're inundated with information, there's so much that's coming at us, whether it's, in terms of video content or audio content, whether in terms of like a sea of faces, and there are a lot of people to meet, but who's going to stick out? Whether it's a question of looking at blogs or sites, there's just so much information out there. You read 400 emails in a day. Why would you open my email as opposed to someone else's email? It's all noise. When there's so much information, it's all noise. in order to make sure that your communication is signal and not noise, you first have to establish a frequency so that people care. And why would people care about you out of the 400 other people that they could be looking at that particular day, the 400 other people that are demanding their attention, that are competing with you? And the way to stick out, ironically, is not so much to draw attention to yourself, but rather to understand that before the information comes the relationship. And that's where emotional intelligence plays such a vital role. That's where empathy fits in. If I know in advance that Noha cares about me, then I will pay attention to her. But if I just think Noha is out to get what she needs from me, well, then there's a 400 other Nohas who want the same thing from me. Why should I look at you and not to someone else? So really what we need to focus on, the prophets tell us when it comes to the questions of empathy and more generally emotional intelligence, is to focus on the relationship, to understand the person that you're speaking with, to listen to them deeply and meaningfully, right? To understand not only the question that they're asking, but what's the question behind the question? What's the person behind the question? What's the emotional state and the intellectual horizon from which that person is speaking? And we see the messenger of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would sometimes answer the same question differently.
Yeah.
And the reason that he would answer differently is not that there was no, it was not that he changed his mind, all right? But rather that he was speaking in response to the unasked question. He was giving advice that was particular to the person who was asking the question. So the best deed, depending on the person, may have been X, Y, or Z, but the best deed was different for each person. And you can't really give that kind of advice until you have a prior understanding of and relationship with that person. So I think empathy is really important for that reason, because it establishes the human relationship before we begin to convince people about whatever it is that we want to say. If they know that we understand them, that we're here for them, that we appreciate them, that we value them, that we love them, that we want what is best for them, then why would they not listen to us? It's because they're not convinced of any of those things. We've been trained to be deeply cynical of any request for information, of any approach, because we know that everybody wants something. And when everyone wants something, well, I'm going to focus on what I want as opposed to what you want, right? And the only way that I'm going to let my guard down is that if you first convince me that you're here not for you, you're here for me.
So on a more practical sense,
Sure.
right? So let's just say you and I are strangers and we are developing a relationship in whatever capacity.
Sure.
How do you or I go about in establishing that relationship to develop empathy and, emotional intelligence towards, the relationship?
Yeah. Of course, there's no algorithm that I can give you, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And everything is situational, but, emotional intelligence begins with listening. And that's why of the 6, rules of prophetic communication that I've distilled in my own research, the first is to listen before you speak. Our temptation is that, look, I have something to say. How do I get it out? How do I be clear? How to be eloquent? How do I be convincing? What logic do I apply? I mean, those are all the wrong questions, because you're focusing on what you have to say. You're not going to get an audience with the person, all right, until they grant you that audience. And the key is to begin by listening to them. So I think especially if you meet someone for the first time, they have no vested interest in listening to you, all right? If they know you and they know that what you have to say can be trusted and is of value, and then maybe you can jump into what you want. But without having built that relationship, really the only way to begin is to listen. And listen includes a number of things. Listen could be literally listening to what they have to say. And in a conversation, 2 people are speaking, so let them speak first. If it's not a conversation, if it's an encounter and you see someone from afar, then it's research. Observe them speaking to someone else. See, are they an introvert? Are they an extrovert? Do they want contact or do they not want contact? How much time do they have? Well, what do you think might be on their mind? Are they with kids? Are they with their spouse? What profession might they be? What are these sort of animating questions that may be on their mind? What might be the interests that are driving them? And if you're meeting someone online, if you've checked their LinkedIn profile or if you've checked their Facebook updates, there's so much that you can do, listening broadly understood, to learn about the other person, to demonstrate interest in the other person in order to establish that relationship before saying a word about what you want.
Do you have a specific, prophetic example of, the prophet, peace be upon him, showing that he is listening to someone rather than, otherwise.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's a couple that are top of mind for me. I'm embarrassed because I'm forgetting the name of the person who approached him, but that's fine. Okay, so I'll share two. So one is is a story within a story, the wider story, and actually I think we discussed this in the January workshop. I don't know if you remember it, but when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, went as a stranger to the city of Taif, all right, really he did not get a positive reception. And he had to take refuge in an orchard. And everybody knows the story of Taif, how he was rejected and humiliated. He was pelted with stones so that his feet bled. But when he took refuge in that orchard, the story within that story is the story of Addas. Now, Addas was a Christian slave, right? He in his own way was a nobody, just like Muhammad in his own way was a nobody. Because in the city of Taif, all right, the people of the city didn't value either of these two people, right? This was a stranger, a foreigner from Mecca. This was a slave, all right, not sharing the ethnicity, the language, the religion, or the place of origin with the people of Taif, all right. So when Addas comes to serve a platter of grapes to this stranger from Mecca, all right, he hears him say the Basmala in the name of God, because he's about to eat, and he's struck by that because he hasn't heard that before. And he begins their conversation by remarking, by God, I have not heard these words, or people of this land do not say these words. And the messenger of God really could have responded in any number of ways, because he was given an opportunity to speak, and he chose not to speak, or at least not to say his piece. He chose to begin with a question to understand who this man was and where he was coming from. So he said, what is your name, and where are you from, and what is your religion? I think he says, he had an opening question to that effect in order to understand where Addas was coming from. And once he learned that Addas was a Christian from Nineveh, he then found the point of connection on which they could build a relationship. And if he hadn't opened in that way, if he hadn't asked the question, if he had just launched in as, let's say a more stereotypical or naive da'i might, that, hey, I have a chance to preach, let me tell this person about Islam, let me tell him about God, let me tell him about the Basmala. No. Let me begin by asking who he is, right? And what might be behind his question, and then I can establish a relationship before conveying my point. So the story goes on, but it begins with an empathetic act of listening.
SubhanAllah. I think another question that I have in mind for you is, I think a lot of people struggle with firmly communicating expectations and needs while still being gentle at the same time. The problem is it is difficult to not get walked all over or feel like you're getting walked over, and be gentle at the same time. And so, obviously people want to be respected. People want to be firm with their needs, their expectations, their, who they are as people, in whatever situation they're in. So how do we go about finding the right balance of being firm and gentle at the same time in our communication with our significant others, our parents, siblings, colleagues, etc.?
Yeah, I'm glad the way that you framed the question, because you're seeking that balance, so you understand the value of gentleness and etiquette, even while you value the importance of standing up for yourself. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
So the question is not which should we go to, how do we do both? Right? And I think that's the first point. There's a false dichotomy. You don't have to be rude to be heard. You don't have to go first to get your way. So if we look to the example of the prophets, so I just gave one example where by leading with a question, he was able to win the relationship and therefore an audience to be able to say his word. There's another example of one of the elite of the Quraysh approached God's messenger, and he approached him with the intention of trying to win him over to leaving them alone. And he said, "Look, what do you want? I'm going to cut the story short in my words." He said, "What do you want? Right? We can marry you. All right. We can give you wealth. We can make you king. Tell us what you want, and we'll give it to you, so you can go away and let us worship our gods and not corrupt our youth." Right? So that's in essence what his pitch is. And being the messenger of God, it's certainly possible I mean, it's certainly possible that God's messenger could have cut him off and said, look, I'm not interested in whatever you have to offer. Or he could have, jumped in with his own spiel, and he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
He let him speak. And moreover, this is the beautiful part where the balance kicks in. He let him speak to the extent that when he was done, he asked, are you done?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he gave him the opportunity to speak more.
Wow.
It's not that he was waiting. Very often when we're listening to someone, we're waiting to jump in. Oh, Noha said this. I have to get back there on that. And it's like a minute later, you're still thinking about what she said before because you're waiting to jump in. When she takes a breath, you jump in.
Mm-hmm.
That's not listening to understand. That's listening to respond. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That's not empathetic. That's not active listening.
Mm-hmm.
So the Prophet ﷺ, not only did he give the man his due, he then gave him more and said, are you done? And when the man said he was done, he effectively locked him in place.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's only natural and logical that if I said, are you done? And you say, yes, you're done. Say, may I speak? What are you going to say?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Since I've extended the courtesy to you,
Mm-hmm.
just almost as a law of nature, certainly a law of human nature, you will want to reciprocate and extend that courtesy back to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gave him the opportunity to then share his message. And he chose to share the message by sharing some ayat from the Quran. So much so that, the man was struck with awe, speechless. He went back to his people and he said, leave this man be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the way that he was so effective at it was not simply that he got his point across, but rather he gave the man an opportunity. He locked him in place, right? Notice the steps here. He listened. He said, okay, are you done? Can I speak? So now you've won the person's attention and the person will pay that attention to you that you wanted. Now let's apply that to a very mundane example. You're a student, I'm a professor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you come into my office hours and you really have something on your mind. And I've been waiting for you to come because I have something on my mind too. I've been waiting to tell you off that you are late every day to my class, all right? Now that's what's top of mind for me. I've got you because you come into my office hours, I'm gonna say my piece.
Mm-hmm.
Now I could approach it that way, all right? Or I could reverse and say, okay, wait a second, I know I wanna say my piece, all right? But let me lead with her. The way that I can make sure that I secure my opportunity is I could say, Noha, it's lovely to see you. I'm glad that you came in. I only have 15 minutes. Why don't you take the first 10? Notice what I did.
Yeah.
All right. I gave you deference, right? Twice over. Once I let you go first.
Mm-hmm.
And second, I'm giving you 10 out of the 15 minutes. All right. But
Yeah.
what I've done in saying that, I've won permission for two things. One is that when we get to 9 minutes, it's not going to be rude for me to say, I'm so glad that you said that. All right. Let me think about it. In the time that we have, can I now say what I want, what I wanted to share? You're not going to think that I'm being rude or I'm interrupting, because you'll realize when I look at my watch and it's 9 minutes, that yeah, he only had 15 minutes, and you have nothing to resent me for, because I gave you 10 out of those 15.
Mm-hmm.
So now just by dint of that, as a law of human nature, you're going to reciprocate and say, okay, I got to listen to him. He gave me 10 minutes, I'll give him 5. And now you're going to give me the kind of attention because you've gotten off your chest whatever it is that you walked in with. You're going to listen with an open mind and an open heart to someone who's treating you well without being walked over, right? Right. So you see the false dichotomy. It's not like, oh, either Nuha's going to get her way today or I'm going to get my way today. That's a win-lose mindset. That one of us is going to win walking out. We have to start with a win-win mindset. How can we both get what we want by the end of this conversation? Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. It makes me think of the idea that, many people say that being a nice person puts them at a disadvantage. Sometimes I say that about myself.
I know. It does.
Yeah.
Because your experience says that. Are you a nice person, generally speaking?
I'd hope so.
Okay. Do you have siblings?
I do, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Would they say you're a nice person?
I don't think so.
No?
Some of them, maybe, yeah. Yes, they would, yeah.
Would they say that when you're nice, people take advantage of you?
Yes.
Okay, so that's real.
Yeah.
All right. That's not just your imagination. Your siblings who know you well,
yes.
who know really how nice you are, regardless of what Facebook Live or Abdur-Rahman think.
Yeah.
All right. And they've seen you operate in the real world, and they've seen you getting hurt.
Yeah.
All right. And they've attributed that no, you're too nice. If only you weren't so nice, you wouldn't be walked over. right?
Yeah.
So yeah, our experience attests to that.
Yeah.
But yet, as ethical human beings, we would like to think that nice guys don't finish last.
Yeah.
So what's the like resolution to this conundrum? I think it's a matter of perspective, if that's your question, right?
Yeah.
In the very short term, it's a gamble. It's a leap of faith. It is quite likely that you're going to lose out by being nice. And you have to accept that. If you're willing to accept that in the very short term, right? Just to manage expectation, let's begin there. Because it's a gamble. The very first wager is a gamble. The very first battle in the war, you could very easily lose, especially when you're going to not come in, full throttle. You're not going to do full court press. You're going to first understand who the other person is. You're going to give them some space. You're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and they might, take every inch that you give them, and that battle you might lose if you want to think in oppositional terms, right? But all it takes is to just project forward, right? From the first wager to the sixth wager, from the first conversation or confrontation to the sixth. Over the course of subsequent conversations, what you're doing is that you're building that relationship that you will then be able to rely on through both thick and thin to be convincing in a way that doesn't require you to be oppressive or unfair, all right? So when you go from the short term to the medium to long term, nice guys do actually do better. And I knew you were gonna, you shared that this is something that you wanted to ask, right, beforehand. And it made me think of this book. So I would love to recommend this book. It's called Give and Take by Adam Grant. Adam Grant is a psychologist. He's an academic. This is not his only book, but I really love this book. He's a professor at, I think, University of Pennsylvania, maybe Wharton at the business school. In any case, he studies psychology and he writes about psychology. And this book is about the difference between, he talks about three kinds of people, depending on how they interact with others. Most people, he says, are matchers. All right, so let's put them in between. Most people are matchers.
Okay.
Some people are takers, and some people are givers. Most people are matchers because they understand that life is about give and take. You have to adjust. You have to compromise. Sometimes you'll win, sometimes she'll win. Those are matchers. That's most of us. Some people are takers. They go into every conversation, all right, thinking it's a confrontation with a win-lose mindset, and they want to win. All right? So they think it's a dog-eat-dog world, and they'd rather be the dog that eats than the dog that's eaten. Those are takers. And then there's givers, right? So he says in any organizational context, you'll have all three profiles. The question he wants to ask, which is, I think, the same question that you begin with, that, look, if I think I'm a giver, because I instinctually am happy to give the other person the first chance, all right? Or the benefit of the doubt, or, more than what I have, or more often than I take. You're a giver, and are you at a loss for that? And he studied that. So he studied that amongst medical students. He studied that amongst, I think, salesmen, or maybe relationship managers at investment firms. And the study that is top of mind for me is in medical school. So in the U.S. medical school is what, 6 years? Does that sound about?
I think it's 4 years and then residency.
Oh yeah, it's 4 and 4. So it's 4 years of college and then 4 years of med school. Right. Yeah. That's right. My sister is a doctor, and she did in 6 years. That was in Pakistan. So it's a different system. Okay. So in the 4 years of med school, in the first 2 years, he tracked the same set of students. All right. And he saw that the givers, all right, had the lowest performance. All right. Which you would expect from what we've just been talking about, right? Because people were likely to ask them for help. So they were too busy helping other people, sharing their notes, or in study groups, or in the team, that they would end up doing a disproportionate amount of the work, that they would fall behind and not do as well. Okay. But over the longer period, over the 4 years, when he did the analysis, he found that the people who were the lowest performers were givers. All right. The people with the highest performance were not matchers. They were not takers. They were also givers.
Wow. Okay.
All right. So matchers and takers were somewhere in between over the long run. Givers were still, the lowest performers were still givers, because those are the givers that, were not able to compensate for the weak aspects of their giving personalities or their giving attributes or behaviors. But over the long term, the reason why the highest performers were also givers is because they acquired a reputation. All right. And the benefits of that. So they got picked more often to be in the most successful groups because people learned that if you want to do well, you got to pick Nuha because Nuha's going to show up and she's going to do the work. All right. So that increases Nuha's reputation among her peers, and then she gets picked for better opportunities. All right. It also builds in reciprocity so that over the long term, when Nuha keeps doing favors, those favors start getting returned. Not in the first instance because she leads, but then people want to reciprocate. All right. So over the longer term, being nice pays off. And in fact, it's the takers that, because they have that sort of hostile, confrontational attitude, people get burned. So at first they give them space, but then they start avoiding them. All right. So the takers hit a glass ceiling. All right. So the ones that are at greatest risk are the givers, but over the long term, the highest performers are also givers. So that's goodness.
So how do you unlearn, if you're a taker?
Yes.
How do you unlearn being a taker? Maybe that's a
You
big
get burnt. You get burnt. I mean, there's another great book by, oh, subhanAllah, I wasn't prepared to share this. Skitma, he's a South African scholar. He's both a scholar of management sciences and he's also a scholar of the Islamic sciences. And I'm forgetting his first name, but his last name is Skitma. His model is called, so some people generally call it servant leadership, where the leader, all right, the leader of people is their servant. Sayyidul Qawm Khadimuha, if that's the Arabic for it. So the leader of a nation or a community or a group is their servant. He calls it the nurture, care. Wow. Anyway, so it's such a beautiful book. So he's done studies within, operational context within companies, but he also brings an Islamic perspective to it. And what he says is that it's a question of maturity, right? So the more emotionally and spiritually mature a person, the further along they are on the gradient from being a taker to being a giver. When we come into this world, we come in as takers, all right? So everything is take. And those of us who grow up graduate from being a taker to being a matcher. Now this is in Grant's language, and then from a matcher to a giver. And the reason is that a taker realizes that they're losing friends. In a friendship, if all I focus on is myself, even though I value the benefits of the friendship, I only value it for the instrumental benefits, right? We get to go see a movie together. I get free tickets when you want me to, when you want to take me to a lecture or something. So I value those benefits, but I'm still selfish. Over the course of time, you're going to give the tickets to somebody else. You're going to invite somebody else. You're going to go to the movie with someone else because you're not getting anything from me. So takers realize that, relationship after relationship, why is this not working? What's going on? And they realize that people are tired of them and they're forced to change, right? So that's, you grow out of it, right? And some people take longer to grow out of it than others. And some people are punished, more harshly and more swiftly than others. But over the long run, things even out.
Okay. Sounds, yeah. I have another question, and I think we are running out of time.
Are we? Okay.
I'll try to pace myself.
Sure.
So it is established that men and women operate and think differently, right?
Okay. Yes.
Including the way they communicate. One dynamic that is, or that displays this is that men find it a lot easier to ask for what they want and need, or at least I think so. Women often find it a lot harder. And so perhaps, I don't know, women perhaps think that they are not qualified enough to, to ask for a raise or promotion in their workplace, for example, or perhaps they are just more likely to fear and avoid asking for what they need. And so my question to you is, in regards to, prophetic communication, can you talk more about these differences?
Absolutely. Yeah. So first, a word of caution. I think definitely the research bears out that men and women are different. They're different in all sorts of ways. They're also different when it comes to communication. And those differences are both natural and they're also learned. right? So to what extent it's nature versus nurture is an open debate, and I'm not the person to opine on that. But the word of caution is that when we talk about gender and topics that are often politicized, like gender is, people may have different experiences and they may react poorly to generalizations. So the word of caution for myself and for you when we talk about this is to say something like, generally speaking, men are, or, you know, many women are, or women often are, right? So to avoid generalizations, or to speak to your own experience. In my experience, I found that the women in my life don't speak up. And in my experience, the men in my life in those same situations have no problem. Right? So again, this is because this is this is a conversation about communication. I'm sort of like going up a level and observing our conversation. I hope that's okay. So
no, that's fine.
So this is advice to me and to you. So generally speaking, yes, I think that pattern bears out. And the question that I can't answer is why, but certainly for women, you know, do we have examples from the stories of the prophets where women are encouraged to speak up for themselves, to take a stand? I mean, I think this is such an important topic. It's an important topic for women. It's also an important topic for men. The two examples that come to my mind, and others may be in a better position to point you to others, additional examples. One of them is one of my favorite stories from the personal life of God's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's about one of his wives, Safiya bint Huyay. Safiya was the daughter of a Jew and the husband of a Jew, and came from a Jewish family before she became Muslim, before she was married to God's Messenger. That was her history, all right? There's no two ways about it. That was her history. So even though she was Muslim and one of the wives of the Messenger, and therefore one of the mothers of the believers, she couldn't quite shake that off. In fact, some of the people from her household, all right, teased her or insulted her about her Jewish heritage. And this really got to her, as you would expect that it would. And she came to God's Messenger and shared that with him. And it's just beautiful what he said in response to her. Because again, like any question can have multiple responses. When it comes to emotional intelligence, right? You have to understand, okay, what does this person need from me right now? Right? What can I give them that is appropriate to give? Not just because they want it, but because this is what's right and this is what's right for them. Right? And these are two different questions, by the way, right? It's that you want to, what's right, you have to tick that, and what's right for them. All right? You have to tick that. So in any case, it's just beautiful what he said. Do you know the story?
I actually don't think so.
Oh,
So I'm very interested to
hear. It's such a small, but it's just it's a lovely anecdote. So she comes to him and she complains that so and so is calling me such and such, right? Picking on me for my Jewish background, and he says to her, "Say to them, all right, Harun is my father, Musa is my uncle, and Muhammad is my husband." All right. Such an exalted response. All right. Because nowhere in that response are you being negative or critical or hostile. You're not giving the other person an inch. All right. If they're bringing their A game, you bring your A game, because sometimes you have to stand up for yourself. And he showed her how to stand up for herself in the best way. All right. If you think you're hot stuff, all right. Right. I've got not one, but 3 messengers in my family. All right. So she took what someone may have thought was an insult, all right, something that was negative, and she flipped it, all right. And he could have advised her to be patient. He could have said, "Look, these things don't matter. Don't worry about it." Or he could have, like, in out of husn dhan, for whoever may have said that to her, he may have defended that person's honor. Don't think poorly of such and such or so and so. No, he gave her the appropriate medicine for what she needed and what the other person may have needed to hear from her. All right. So that I think is an example of that, of standing up for yourself, but in such an honorable way. All right. So it's just, it blows my mind. And of course, one of the qualities of God's Messenger that makes him so praiseworthy was jawami al-kalam, concision of speech. So in just a few words, he was able to deliver such a powerful dose of medicine. The other example that came to my mind when you asked me this question was about the practice of the women of Medina. There's certain questions that women will prefer to ask other women, all right? But insofar as this was God's messenger, they would come to him and they would ask him. And so much so that sometimes in his response, Aisha would have to clarify that this is what he means, right? Because it was a private question and the answer required a level of detail. But the person who asked the question didn't shy away from asking the question because she needed it, right, for her practice. And Aisha radiallahu anhu remarked how excellent are the women of the Ansar, that their shyness does not prevent them from learning their religion. All right, which I think is also so beautiful because it doesn't put down shyness.
Yeah.
For me, the lesson is not that don't be shy. Right? Like, if you're a girl, just be a guy. No, we're different. We don't need to be the same. All right. Right. So with what is appropriate to us and to our nature and whatever our style is, you can own that style. You can own that personality. All right. But don't let that be a hindrance. All right. So how excellent are the women of the Ansar that they do not let shyness prevent them from learning their religion.
Wow. I think this is a great place to end. They are telling us to wrap up.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yes. I have many more questions for you, but I think actually since I took your class in January, I think you do cover these questions in your class. So thank you, Ustadh Abdur-Rahman, for taking the time to have this conversation with me, and to everyone who listened at home. Since I have more questions, I'm sure that you guys have more questions. It is not too late to register for Ustadh Abdur-Rahman's Quranic and Prophetic Communications course, which is co-taught by Dr. Basuni, who is also a teacher of mine. Alhamdulillah. The link is below this Facebook Live video, however way it works. Make sure you head over to the website to learn more about this course and many other courses that BIS provides. The next Real Talk session will be on Saturday with Dr. Asif Hirani with Faris al-Muntasser, who is my brother actually. So please tune into that. And again, thank you guys so much for joining us, and please stay healthy and stay safe, and may Allah protect us all.
Can I ask you two questions before we close?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, one is, are you going to compare notes with Faris?
Probably. Yes.
And the second is, how do you feel right now?
Alhamdulillah, I feel confident actually, and I feel good, accomplished.
You glad we did this?
Yes, alhamdulillah.
Me too, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
I hope that it benefited others just as it benefited me.
Yeah, I hope it benefits me too.
Alhamdulillah. Okay.
Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Kareem to you and to everyone. Yes. How does this? I think it's still live.
Is it?
Yes.
That's cool. I'm happy you're talking. I imagine the person who's supposed to switch it off will switch it off.
I think so.
So you have our permission to switch it off. But while it's playing, I wanted to pick up something that you said, which is that the course is co-taught. So it's not that it's co-taught by Dr. Basuni, it's that it's co-taught by me. Because he's not only one of the instructors of this course, he's also the president of the seminary. He is my imam, my mentor, my teacher, and one of my favorite people on the planet. So it's my honor to be co-teaching a course with him. And insofar as Quranic and prophetic communication, he's a scholar of Quranic da'wah.